welcome to our InkTank podcast, episode 1. Let's thank everyone who got us this far.
Thank you very much.
Episode 1, so I don't know. Anyways, this is Behind the Cuts, where we go in-depth into a submission that didn't quite work so well for the magazine, but, we thought it's a educational opportunity to talk to everyone about the writing process, give some tips. I guess we should introduce ourselves, Ricky.
You start first.
Okay. I'm the editor-in-chief of InkTankMagazine.com. My name is Blair Beauchesne. When I'm not serving up hot beverages, I am a freelance writer. I write poetry, prose, and prose poetry. A lot, about technology and our lives. And hey. And I'm also a nitpicker. So you will learn to hate me just like everyone else in my creative writing course did.
Yeah, it's true. I'm Ricky Lima. I'm one of the co-editors, a little below Blair. And I like to write really crazy things because that's what appeals to me the most. And when I'm not writing, I'm probably playing video games or just sleeping. I do that a lot.
Sleeping is nice.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so why don't we get right into it?
Yeah, what do we have today?
What we have today is a short story that was submitted to us for the Calamity issue. It is entitled Shining Like Diamonds. So, this is our first episode, so when we explain what we're going to do, instead of reading all this crap, why don't we just put the description, the link in the description actually, we'll put a description, but we'll also put a link in that description that will go to our page, which you can read the full text. So we'll give you, pause the video, do it right now, give you about 10 seconds or so, we'll play some nice music here for 10 seconds or something.
So a lot of things that we found in this story are things that can be applied to many writers in their career and many faux pas that writers have done in their writing.
And, these things are easily avoidable as long as you know what you're looking for, right? We've had the benefit of going through several years of university, had the professors point them out to us. So we paid $50,000 for that education, so we're passing it on for free. One of the main things we did notice with this was repetition. There's a paragraph that reads, "That evening, Lance looked around the circle with a look of contempt on his wrinkled face. His face was red from frostbite and the booze, but after many years of Arctic winters, Lance barely flinched as the wind howled, licking at his exposed skin." So, first off the bat, you can hear, looked and look. Repetition of very similar words, right? This is not quite poetry, but you do want to focus when you're editing on those words, right? Because they do, when you're in, you're writing your first time,
exactly.
You're in the groove, you just kind of right on through, right? And we're going to get into the importance of editing and why it's very important to do. And that will help you get those kind of things out. You don't want to repeat the same words, the same sort of phrases in the next couple sentences. The second one of that we picked up was actually a repeated cliche that comes throughout the whole thing. When he says, "the wind howled," right? He's used that line that the wind is howling a few times, and many writers have used that before him. It's a very worn-out cliche. It's sort of lost a little bit of meaning. There's opportunities to use fresher examples. And if perhaps there weren't so many repetitions of that, it wouldn't be as big of a deal as it is.
Exactly. And when you're going to use a cliche, a metaphor, you got to do something with it, change it if you're going to use a cliche metaphor. So, if the story is about, eating popsicles, and you talked about the wind licking the people lick the popsicles, sure, that is turning that on its head and adding something to it. But just on its own, it gets kind of boring.
Yeah, and that's a good metaphor right off the top of your head. The wind licks popsicles. Remember that, kids. And if you use that, we will sue you for plagiarism. So throughout this piece, we also found many, many, many instances of cliches. We just discussed one, like the wind howling. There's other things like the wind licking. There's when the wind biting. There's the wind chewing. I'm not sure. I can't go through all of them. I'm just looking at my first page here. Snow falls softly. There's a great river. It's a lifeline. It's just like there are so many instances of cliche. There's the other repetition of howls right on the first page. Perfect.
There you go.
But yeah, using cliches, as Ricky was saying, you can use them if they're few and far between, and also if you use them in fresh, kind of slanted way. But cliches just aren't, these words that we use. Cliche, there's figurative cliches is what we're talking about, the wind howling. It's the way we create images. But there's also narrative cliches, and this piece is structured in one of them. Surprise, surprise, none of you were, shocked when you read that the alcoholic lost his family and died.
Yeah.
Yeah, that storyline is a little bit of a narrative cliche, right? We know what's going to happen before the end of it is. We can predict it. It's a story that's been used many, many, many times.
Do you think narrative cliches can be avoided by simply fresh dialogue and changing up, like, the action and stuff, like, where the main plot line... I mean, every story's been written, so how do we get away from narrative cliches?
Well, definitely. It's adding fresh elements into the mix, right? Because of course it is impossible to avoid these things. I guess in a complete originality, right? You're always going to have elements of them here or there. There's always going to be characters that we're used to, that we've heard of before. Putting them in new situations, new twists, new slants. That's what freshens it up enough, right? Even if it provides new insight. At the ending of this piece, if we had new insight into Lance, into his behavior or something, it might have, saved it from ending as a narrative cliche.
That's true. And the thing about cliches are they sound good, right? When you're writing them, they sound good, and that's why they are cliches, because they sound so good. Everyone uses them. So, I mean, it is really difficult to avoid these cliches, but I think if you could find your own voice, and once you've really found your voice and locked into it, that's when you start coming up with really fresh material.
Yeah. One of my teachers used to describe it to me like this. A cliche is the easiest path in the brain. I'm going to get a little bit sciencey. I love science. I'm probably going to bore all of you out there. But essentially, like, your brain is a bunch of networks of, electrical signals. And the ones that are most well used become the easiest to traverse, right? So when you hear a cliche over and over and over, it gets more used in the brain. It's easier for your brain to recall that cliche. So when you're going through in your first draft, it's just like, that's easy. I'm going to put it in there, right? It allows you to get on with the plot. It allows you to get on with the dialogue, get on with whatever you're getting on with.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that in the first draft, but then you need to move beyond that.
Exactly. So, like, when we get a submission sent to us, it should be emailed to us polished. It should be emailed to us edited. Honestly, I don't know. I'm a little bit ruthless, maybe. There's no reason I should have double spaces after an ending period. There's no reason I should have, possessives without an apostrophe, spelling mistakes, all that, typical stuff that you can just go through and read and pick up on.
Yeah, I mean, even Microsoft Word has it underlines stuff like that. So, I mean,
but let's not rely too much on Microsoft Word, right? I'm sure a lot of these submissions we get that do have spelling errors are not, spelling errors because the person mistyped something. It was because they relied too heavily on Microsoft Word. Personally, what I believe is, you know what you're trying to say, but sometimes it's difficult to actually see what you're saying. And that's the case in a lot of these pieces, right? Instead of rereading it, possibly, I read stuff out loud to myself so I can hear what it sounds like. It, gives me a little bit of that distance so I can catch those cliches. I can catch those spelling errors, those awkward sentence structures. So, Ricky, there was another huge issue, kind of structural with this. Did you pick up on it?
Yeah, there's a lot of tense changes within the piece. And, I mean, tense changes are really hard. At least for me, I had a hard time at first with tense changes because you write so fast you don't really pick up on it. Like, I mean, in the second paragraph, there's a line, "A great vein of water that flows with harnessed fury, even in the depths of winter, parts of the river remain unfrozen." The word flows, it doesn't really, the tense doesn't fit in with everything else. And then...
well, for the majority of the piece, it was written in present tense, but it had a tendency of slipping into past tense. A good example of it was the fourth paragraph there. Huddled down by the river, a group of down-and-out men sit under a bridge. They sit in a circle around a small fire. and the sentence goes on. But huddled, when it starts out the sentence, is in past tense. The sentence before was in present tense, and then it slips back into present tense in the next sentence when they say sit, right? So these verbs are past and present tense. One thing I find with my writing is if I notice a lot of tense slips to me in one of my pieces, I move it to that tense.
Oh, yeah?
It's the writing telling me it wants to be in that tense.
So do you change the entire piece that way?
Yeah.
Wow.
And sometimes it's when you're switching tenses, it's more than just changing a word. It's like changing huddled to huddling or vice versa, right? You have to change critical details, the way the story is told. It can be a whole rewrite sometimes, but your piece turns out so much for the better when you actually go and do those writes.
Do you do that in your second draft, or do you, as soon as you notice that in your first draft, do you change it, or?
Well, it's whenever it feels right. Like if you have still issues with plot, with character, with your significance, you want to possibly deal with those first. Sometimes, depending on the piece, you want to deal with the tense slips first. Find, the way the story wants to be told, and then you'll find the story, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. That's good. It might be really hard, but I mean, writing isn't easy, right?
Writing isn't easy. Yeah. How about the title? What did you think about the title, Shining Like Diamonds?
Like, I got it because it was about snow, but
you might have gotten it a little bit too early.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so much more going on that, like, with the title could have. See, I find it really hard to find the perfect balance between really telling what the story's about and kind of showing an abstract meaning of what's going on. And Blair, how do you come up with titles?
It's an organic process. Titles are some of the most difficult things. Names are some of the most difficult things I find personally. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I come up with a title and it creates a piece. With a lot of the 250-word stories that I'm writing in my blog, a lot of those are spawned. I thought of a cool title. I wanted to write something about it. So, it came along. Sometimes a title comes in halfway through when you find, what the beating heart of the piece is, what you want it to be. And sometimes it's just, flavoring to the piece. So you know how the piece wants to be read. That might be a little bit more poetry than a lot of prose. But, titles are very significant. Don't just, throw anything as your title up there. Now, I'm not saying, Shining Like Diamonds, it was just a throwaway, right? It does tie back in at the end there.
Do you use phrases or words that you used in your piece as titles? Do you think that is a good way to go about it, or can you find different ways to do that?
Well, it's all a personal thing, right? That's what I've been saying the whole time. Sometimes, repeated things, do give satisfaction to the reader, depending on the type of story, right? Where, it's like, oh, that's why that's the title, because it is a central idea. Shining Like Diamonds, I'm not sure is central here. I'm not sure is what this piece is about. Does that, cliche, unfortunately, I hate to say it, is that cliche title evoking what the meaning of the story is to me?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Does it evoke that to you? What does Shining Like Diamonds evoke to you?
Shining Like Diamonds kind of evokes a really clean-cut, very aristocratic kind of idea to it, and I don't think that this story necessarily reflects that exactly. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe...
but let me interject. Is it ironic that he's using the title then?
See, I don't know, because Shining Like Diamonds is kind of a high concept, and this whole story is very, very low concept, and I just, my brain can't reconcile the two images. Maybe that's a fault on my own, but I don't know.
Yeah, like when I get into the ending, I guess we can transition into talking about the ending here. That's when this title finally occurs, right? All throughout, we have these images of snow and, sort of cliched descriptions. And then, we follow Lance throughout the whole story of his down and out, his drinking, his fight. And then we get this, it almost seems sterilized at the end. And, that's not what the title is evoking to me. Shining Like Diamonds, as you're saying, like this high aristocratic thing. Yeah. But it seems sterilized at the end, where, Lance is being sterilized by the snow shining like diamonds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's not what the story's about to me. It's not about this sterilization at the end, even though at the beginning it does, tell you he's dead.
Yeah, I don't know. See, titles are tough. Can't really tell a person exactly how to title a piece, but Shining Like Mud? No?
Yeah, I don't think that quite would work for this piece. Maybe another piece. Maybe that'll be a 250 word story for me.
Dude.
But if I was to suggest a title for this one, I actually couldn't yet. I'm not sure it's far enough along to where it wants to be to know what title it will evolve in the end. Because that was one of the things, like, when I read the ending, I wasn't sure where... I believe the author here has intent of where he wants this story to go. I'm not sure if it's lived that far to get there yet. And that was one of the problems with it. A title is supposed to evoke the beating heart, the meaning of the piece, what the reader is supposed to take away, right? And I don't know if this has found that yet. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Do you think it would benefit from being a little bit longer or shorter?
Well, one of my professors told me, sometimes he writes 3,000 words of a novel a day to only cut out, 2,000, 2,500. Like, sometimes he even said he's cut out all those words he wrote the day before out of the story. So, overwriting can never be a problem as long as you're editing well and okay, are these words serving my story, and you can critically read your pieces.
I'm a big fan of shorter pieces, and I tend to edit my things to be shorter. I just think shorter writing is a sign of real talent when you can convey exactly what you want in a very minimum amount of space. So, I mean, for me, I'd like to see this shorter, but...
Yeah. Well, it gets sort of into the poetry, prose sort of argument, right? I can give you a haiku, which in 3 lines, evokes the world. Or I can give you, a novel, like something written by Tolstoy, which could kill a baby if you dropped it on it, that, describes a whole life and all of the meanings of that life, right? So, am I a maximalist? I'm not sure. Does this piece want to be maximalized? I'm not sure, right? I'm not sure it's there yet for me to make a judgment call on that.
Well, I guess it's up to the author to figure out whether he wants to expand on it or shorten it.
But, coming off of that point, we can talk about structure a little bit. Possibly shortening some areas. On the second and third paragraph, we're going right back to the beginning of the story again. Right, talking from the end, talking about the beginning. The first 2 paragraphs, I'm just going to read them here. The town was built on the shores of a great river. For many years, the river served as the town's lifeline, a great vein of water that flows with harnessed fury. Even in the depths of winter, parts of the river remain unfrozen. From the holes in the ice comes a crunching sound as the ice crashes against the rocks, pushed by the current. Out of this turmoil, the ice fog rises like a demented phoenix, coiling its deathly fingers around every nook and cranny of the city. So, Ricky, what do you think those 2 paragraphs are doing?
It's kind of just describing the kind of atmosphere of what's going on around this city, right? And I mean, it's a really cool image with the demented phoenix.
Yeah, that was one of the bright moments that he had going on in this piece.
See, he took a cliche of a phoenix rising out, and then he changed it. He switched it to being cold and demented, and fog. See?
Yeah, I don't know if when phoenixes get cold, if they're demented. If any of you have a phoenix and you don't mind, screwing around with it, try it out. Email us, let us know.
But it's mainly just describing a city, and it does it for like 2 paragraphs, which is it's a very Tolkien-esque. I mean, he loved to write a whole bunch of descriptions, and I wasn't a big fan of those, but hey.
Yeah. But, I'm not sure what these descriptions are doing, right? Because we're focusing on Lance, his character. I'm not convinced that these descriptions, while nice, are helping us develop Lance, helping us find what the story is doing, right? So these are paragraphs that, might help you as the writer get into the mindset of the scenario and be in that world while you're writing it. But they're possibly paragraphs that you can cut out in your second draft and your third draft later on just to get the story moving, right? Because structurally, I'm not convinced that those, those 2 paragraphs are relevant. And it's not like I'm nitpicking here, because that's not the only time that distractions. It's, it's a common thing even in my own writing. That, we can find, if we look structurally, look critically at our own work, we're going to have better work. And then you're going to have better stuff to read. And
the really difficult thing about cutting this is you'll lose, like, the demented phoenix kind of line. Like, in writing, you have to kill your babies, they always say. So, I mean, like, something beautiful like that, you got to say, okay, this whole paragraph isn't working, maybe I can work this one image into something else, right? So you take it and you say, okay, you cut that out and you keep it kind of like as a little patch to put somewhere else.
Yeah, I always love, all of my first drafts I try to write in an actual physical notebook. The reason is, it's so easy to delete things, lose things on your computer. If I have a physical notebook, and actually behind Ricky, or my stack of notebooks this high, I have every line I ever written. Sure, it would be a pain in the ass to go through and like, oh, what was that line I wrote about, about how snowmen are melting, right? But if I was just flipping through there, I could trip across it one day, and that can spawn a whole new story.
That's right.
It can spawn, a poem. It can, be used in so many different ways. Yeah, so one of the other things that I'm not convinced, is working in this piece is the voice and diction of it. We have strange inconsistencies in it. At some points, he's using very, lowbrow cliches that you would expect, from maybe less educated people, which, Lance is one of, so it can, create that atmosphere if they're used well and used effectively. But at the same time, we have certain words like facade. We're talking about phoenixes. Those are very high levels of language. So the inconsistency back and forth doesn't create a solid voice for me.
I like to point out this sentence here. Lance took a long sip. He made soft, satisfied grunts as he swallowed. Taking a second, drown-out gulp from the bottle, the man next to him became visibly agitated. So now the image between satisfied grunts as he swallows and someone next to him being visually agitated, it doesn't... For me, the two words don't really mesh together, I think. Like, you're setting up an image of these guys grunting in a bar, and then another guy is agitated, and you're like, well, I think there's another way to describe this man's agitation, right?
Yeah, like, you're using very physical things with these grunts, the actual consumption. Those are very physical aspects. But then, you've distanced yourself so much by saying visibly agitated.
Exactly.
A very sterile, very clinical phrasing of it. Different phrasing, like if you're talking about him getting red in the face or his muscles tightening, might have been more physical.
I think the muscles tightening one would have been really good.
See, that's why I'm editor-in-chief, because no. But there's other ways to address these things that I think this author is still finding their voice.
And maybe even like more lowbrow than that, like the guy next to him like shit his pants or something, like something something that you would hear at a place like this.
Yeah, everything's about shit to you, isn't it, Ricky?
Yeah, well.
Yeah, but what you want to do with the words you're choosing, and it's not as much as poetry where every single word has to work for the thing. But everything here does have to work to create a whole. You want to edit things at a word-to-word level, at a sentence level, at a paragraph level, at a chapter level if you're writing a novel or whatever, right?
Do you think it's better to look at it as a whole and then start whittling your way down to eventually the word-to-word thing? So you say, what am I trying to do? How am I doing that? And so you look at the paragraphs. And you're like, okay, how's this paragraph working? So you look at the sentences. And then how's that sentence working? And then you look into the...
That's the the university education coming right in there. Like, that is like classic university essay writing style, right? You want to know what your piece is doing, how it's doing it, and then, optimize how it's doing it on a paragraph-to-paragraph level, at a sentence-to-sentence level. That is very, clinical, very sterile, though. So this is what you want to do in your later drafts. You don't want to do it in your first, second draft, where you're still figuring out what the story's about, because then you won't be able to, get it to where it wants to be. You want to get it on the page first, and then through your edits, polish it, right? You don't want to cut out stuff before you're ready to cut out stuff.
That's right.
Cool. Facts. important in fiction?
It depends what your story's about. If you're having an unreliable narrator, like I mean most or some stories have, then no, facts don't matter at all. But if you're doing a reliable narrator kind of thing, an omnipotent kind of thing, then you're gonna need to check these facts because it just takes people out of your world. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. So there's one big one that leaped out to me in this. Further on in the story, Lance walks into a bar. He orders a Mickey of rum and a bottle of Bud. How much does it cost, Ricky?
$6. What?
Yeah. I don't know what universe this is in. I don't know what time period this is in. You know, it feels fairly modern because there's cars, there's street lamps, there's that type of stuff. But, you know, I don't know where you could find a Mickey for $6.50, even just a Mickey for $6.50.
Well, this is us coming from a Canadian perspective in Toronto, so I mean,
well, it is set up in the Klondike, so it's not too far. It's not worlds away from us.
But right? I mean, I know like in America when you could buy beer in a convenience store or corner store, grocery store. I mean, things are a little bit cheaper there, but still $6 for all of that. I don't know.
Yeah, like typically when you go to a bar, you know, a bottle of beer will cost you $6.50 alone. Now, this is an off-license. I've never been to an off-license. Have you been to an off-license?
I don't think so.
But, you know, those illicit things in my frame of mind, they normally charge you more. Why? Because they can. Those bastards. Right? But, you know, there's certain facts that you, in your later edits, have to go through and, you know, research. You know, when talking about this, I actually did research into Klondike. I actually did do research into Budweiser, right? Because there were stuff I didn't know about. And before coming on here and making an ass of myself by saying something I didn't believe or didn't know and pretending I believed, you know, I wanted to make sure they were real, right? And that fact to me just stuck out like impossible, right? Maybe if it was $10, maybe if it was $12, it wouldn't cause that thing. But once... essentially, these are issues because, to me at least, because once a fact sticks out to me, it takes me out of the experience. I stop reading your piece, and I start remembering that I'm sitting here reading your piece. If that makes any sense, right?
Well, it's like going down a road, and then there's a little bump, and you're like, whoa, what?
Yeah, you suddenly realize you're driving a car
exactly.
instead of, you know, in the experience of it. You know, it breaks your immersion, right? And there was a couple different, you know, places where, you know, this broke my immersion. And that was one of the major ones that I was kind of like, really? $6.50? And then I did all that research, and then 15 minutes later I got back to reading the piece, right? You know, it could be so much smoother. You could just get it through from start to finish, you know, and have a in-depth emotional experience. But, you know, taking those breaks to research stops me from enjoying it as much as I could. Final words, Ricky.
Final words. I really liked the general kind of idea of what's going on, but if all the cliches were taken out, tenses were fixed up, some of the structure maybe make it a little bit shorter, I think it could be a really strong piece.
Mm-hmm. Even if, for me, like talking as the editor-in-chief of InkTank magazine, even if just all the cliches were taken out and it was a little bit fresher in some places, and had some brilliant images, sort of like that, you know, Demented Phoenix more often. I had more things of that. I'd be happy to publish the piece. But receiving it with, like, so many small problems so often, you know, prevents me from enjoying it and, you know, lowers it down on my ranking of when I'm, you know, going through reading pieces and considering them for publishing, right? So, you know, a couple of those things, if, you know, the author takes them into consideration, but also you, the viewer, the young writer, the old writer, the developing writer, or even just the person who likes watching YouTube videos. Takes these into consideration, you know, you're going to have a lot better pieces. And, you know, maybe you people watching YouTube who aren't writers might enjoy writing if you try it, or,
that's true.
You know, might enjoy reading the stuff you're reading, you know, having a little bit more knowledge about what you're reading.
Exactly. And, I mean... these things can be applied to a lot of writing that is out there, and don't be like, oh, I could never be a writer. Just take it a step at a time, I think.
But don't call yourself a writer if you're not. Yeah. Okay, so I guess we're going to move on into the other segment.
Yeah.
So, we sat here for however long that was, ragging on, well, I guess ragging might be a little bit mean. Critiquing, going through, but let's have a little bit of fun, right? I like to call this segment Slamming Dead Poets.
Yeah.
So, who have we chosen today, Ricky, from our big old poetry tome anthology?
Well, we picked probably the greatest writer of all time.
Debatably.
Maybe.
At least one of the oldest and most well-known.
Yeah. Mr. Bill Shakespeare.
Bill Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I won't read this in a British accent. I'll take it easy on
I want perfect
you.
iambic pentameter.
Oh, man.
Do it.
Too hard. This poem is called Full Fathom 5. I know that sounds like a Speed Racer knockoff, but it's actually from The Tempest. Ariel reads it during The Tempest. So here it is. Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Sea nymphs hourly ring his knell. Ding dong, hark! Now I hear them. Ding dong, bell.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the ding dongs are just weird.
I know. Like, why are you throwing sound effects into your poetry here, Bill? You could just have somebody off stage going ding dong. Do you need to have Ariel saying that?
No, you don't. See, but it's one of those things that we're taking out of context. Like within the Tempest, Ariel is like a spirit, and he's trying to make her playful or something. But I don't know. I could do without the sound effects. Like what the hell?
I could totally do them. And like, do I believe that Ariel could crash a ship by saying this crap? No way.
Ding-dong. Yeah,
no ding dongs are crashing a ship, right? That thing has cannons. It could fire one from the ship, kill Ariel, kill everyone on that island. Full Fathoms 5 is way too far away for ding dongs to work.
That's true. Although the first line I really like, Full Fathoms 5, thy father lies. I think that's so cool. Like, it sounds so rhythmic and stuff, and like you're saying, it's like a Speed Racer thing. I think we should make a show called Full Fathom 5, and it's about guys
starring us.
Yeah, sinking boats. It's like us sinking boats. That'd be amazing.
It could be sort of like a mix between Speed Racer and I guess like Miami Vice.
Yes, on the seas.
On the high seas.
And our boat is called Ding Dong.
Ding Dong? Wouldn't it be called Full Fathom 5? Or is there like 5 of us and we're like the Fathom Squad?
Exactly. You just think a lot.
I don't know. Bill, clean up your act.
Come on. Now the next one that we have is a pretty well-known one. Blair, which one is this?
It's from his sonnet series, We're going from, fathoms to love. Love. It's sonnet 130, maybe one of the littler known ones. You should know it if you know your Shakespeare, though. Get on that. 130. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, then why her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white. I have seen... But... I fucked that up. I am starting over.
Okay. Edits!
Edits! You're not even seeing this. I'll put that in after the credits.
Yeah.
Giving everybody the finger. That'll get us views. So this is sonnet 130 from William Shakespeare. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun, which means brown. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such roses I see in her cheeks. And in some perfumes there is more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare.
Mm-hmm. I'd also like to point out this book has a little annotation for she, and when you look at the annotation, it says woman. What?
Yes, please. just viewers, we hope you realize when we're talking about she, we're talking about a woman. Let's just clarify that.
Who edited this? John Stallworthy?
Yeah. Clean up your act, John.
John Stallworthy. Come on. But this one,
What a putrid woman. Shakespeare, what a putrid woman.
That's true. She's got, like, wires and she just stinks.
And she doesn't have any coral in her cheeks. Come on, Shakespeare. Come on. You know, you were the bard. You were the sweet-talking one. You couldn't get a better woman than this. With dun breasts and wires in her hair. She has no color in her cheek. Come on, Shakespeare.
Clean up your act. No, but this one's one of those ones where people are like, oh, it's so beautiful because he doesn't put his lover on a pedestal and stuff. But then, what's the point of poetry if it's not to make things more beautiful than they actually are? You know what I mean?
How does this woman feel reading this sonnet about her, right?
I'd like kick Shakespeare in the balls. I'd be like, what the hell, man?
You wrote this about me, I would throw that sonnet in his face.
Exactly.
Yes. And the other thing I don't like about Shakespeare's sonnets is they set the bar too goddamn high. Right? I'm a writer. Every girl I date wants me to write her poetry. She wants me to write her sonnets. I don't want to write this. You know how fast she'd break up with me if I said her hair's worth wires?
She'd be like, that sucks.
And, like, my other bone to pick with you, Shakespeare, Bill, if I may, about your sonnets, your reworking of the sonnet form. Your volta coming on the 12th line to have 2 lines as your couplet, unwork the whole poem. I might be talking too technically here.
Yeah.
But, like, a volta is supposed to, like, reverse the whole point of the poem, right? And give you a new meaning to read it on. But you know what? I don't like that. You know, those classic, like, sonnets, you had, like, 6 lines for your volta. You had 6 lines to understand the reworking of that poem, to take it in a different direction. 2 lines is not enough, Bill. Not enough.
Well, this goes back to the idea that we were talking about before, about whether you should shrink it or expand it. And I think by shrinking it, it makes it a lot more punchy, but at the same time, you don't get as much from it.
Yeah, like, Bill, I know you're a performer, right? You want to have those punchy 2 lines in there. But you know what? Like, that's not enough. You go on about how ugly she is here and how hideous she is and how she reeks and how you don't even want to listen to her because, you know, like, you'd rather listen to some jams, right? I get it, Bill. But, like, those 2 lines, and yet by heaven I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare, does not underdo it, does not change it enough.
Maybe he's saying his love is rare because she's so ugly. He's like, no one else would love you except me.
Oh, Bill. Oh, Bill. Any last words? About anything. About anything.
About anything. Keep it short, keep it simple, and keep it creative. I think those are the only things you need to know for writing.
Good words to go on. So, if you liked this video, I think there's buttons up there. You can click like, you can click subscribe. There's comments down below that you can, like, comment and talk to us in. If you want your piece featured on here, email, podcast@inktankmagazine.com. Send it in. We'll look at, you know, early drafts of things. We will look at, you know, final drafts of things, rejected things. You know, please don't send us anything published because, you know, we don't want to deal with that. You know, another magazine coming after us. You know, you can see how much, you know, money I have in the background here. No lawyers can be hired. You know, but yeah, like, subscribe, and maybe you'll be on the next one. Take it easy.
See ya.
See ya.